Another day, another lesson. Let's go ahead and just jump right into it. We should be right here on this panel. Okay, first word we see here, omae. This is going to be one of those words that you see over and over again, and I'm sure there's a very famous phrase that I will not quote because I have restraints that also uses the word omae. And it's basically the word for you, but in kind of a rough sense. One of the things that you have to understand about Japanese is there are going to be multiple ways to use a pronoun. So there are different ways to say the word I, different words for the word you, and so on and so forth. Omae is like a very rough way of saying you. It doesn't really have, it's not disrespectful, but it's also not really something that you would say to people that you were to see above you in rank. Like, you wouldn't really talk to your parents by saying omae, right? I like to think of this concept as like grandma words, right? Omae isn't really like a word that you would ever use to refer to your grandma or say in front of your grandma. Usually omae is it's going to be people that are like your level or you see as below you, but never above you. Honestly, I don't even know if that is necessarily true. Just think of the word omae as you, but in like a rough sense. Next up is the ni particle. We refer to the ni particle here as the direction particle because its main job is to show the direction that something is happening within a sentence. So it's usually like towards something or away from something, right? It can obviously be shortened a little bit, but towards or away from is the way I want you guys to think about the ni particle for right now. Again, it's got some other uses, but we'll get into those when we get into those. So we know that omae ni, whatever the action of the sentence is, that we'll be getting into in just a moment here, is either coming from you or it's going towards you. And we'll get some more context as to which one it is in just a moment. Next word here is going to be tsuka maeru, pronounced tsuka for the kanji, maeru for the non-kanji. This is going to be a very, very important word for a Pokémon manga because it refers to catching. So to catch is tsukamaeru. You may have noticed this already on your own, and if you did, good job. Good job. I'm proud of you. Proud of you, buddy. But this rare is actually a concept that we've already gone over. So let's go ahead and see how it applies here. We should know at this point that rare is going to be the first part of passive form. So, tsukamaeru, what group is it in? It ends in edu. What? Gonna go ahead and guess that this is group 2, right? So, tsukamaeru, the ru is going to drop. The ru is going to be put here instead. So if tsukamaeru means to catch, what would the passive version of that be? It would probably be something along the lines of to get caught. Promise I can spell it, you guys. To get caught. So weirdly enough, this ru on the end of tsukamaerareru got turned into the sound n. That's a little weird. What's going on there? Well, this is a little bit difficult to explain, but I'll do my best here. When you have a word ending in the basic form, so you've got your u ending on the end of a verb, you can turn it into its n sound as a sudden stop. Sudden stop. So this is basically like speaking with an accent. It doesn't change the meaning of the word, but if you have a word that ends in its regular u ending, you can kind of like stop with an n sound. Usually if the next word is going to also start with an n sound, this sounds more natural. Or you can just do it as like, it's kind of like speaking in slang almost, right? It does not change the meaning of the word itself. It's just like, it's kind of like the difference between saying going to and saying gonna. Like, would you really say that one of these means something vastly different from the other? Probably not. This is kind of the same as this here, and I'll go ahead and show it with some examples. So this doesn't really happen too much with group 1, so I'm going to ignore that for right now, and we'll focus on groups 2 and 3. So taberu can become taben. Again, it's just a sudden stop. You don't have to think about it any more than that. It's like going to and gonna, going to eat and gonna eat. Taben, totally fine. And suru can become sun, and it does the same thing. Again, I don't want you to think too hard about this. It does not change the meaning of the word at all. This is just a bunch of kids speaking in slang to each other, and that's really the only thing that you have to know about it. Okay, next up we have the no particle. But senpai, I hear you scream. Haven't we already gone over the no particle? That's the type particle. It lets us describe a noun by using another noun to show what type of noun we're talking about. Well, oh by golly, here I am to burst some bubbles. There are some particles that, despite having similar sounds to other particles, are actually a completely different particle. And this is one of those times. Even though we already know how to use one of the no particles, this no is a sentence ending particle. When used to end a sentence, this no particle is what we call the curiosity particle. So the curiosity particle's job is to essentially throw a question at somebody else. You can think of it as a question mark, but there's another particle in very close proximity that works a little bit better for that. Basically, when you ask somebody a question by ending with the no particle, it's kind of like letting the other person know that like you're waiting for their response. It's not a hypothetical question at all. You are basically asking them to explain something or answer a question or elaborate on something. That is essentially what the no particle does. If that's a confusing concept to you right now, then you can think of it as just a question particle. That's also completely fine. It's the more casual version of the question particle. But do know that when a character asks another character a question ending with the no particle, it's kind of like saying, I don't want to move on with this conversation until you answer this question. Like, I really want to know your answer to this question. That's basically what it's doing. Now, the ka particle right after it is what we call the question mark particle. That is ka's job. Ka is a literal question mark. See what I did there? I'm sure I stole that from somebody, but oh by golly, is it useful. Ka is for asking questions. You throw it out the end of a sentence, turns the entire thing into a question. That's all you need to know about it. Now, a logical question I'm sure that you have at this point is, why on earth would we need to end a sentence with not one, but two different particles that both show that we are asking a question? Well, let me tell you. When you have a situation like this, where you have both a no and a ka at the end of a question, it is a slightly more emphatic question than you would normally have. What this basically means is there is a little bit more emotion behind it, and that emotion is usually very pointed. I'll simplify it. In this case, no and ka show a level of doubt towards the thing that we are currently asking. This character is essentially being sarcastic. He's being a little bit of a jerk here when he asks this. The no and the ka together are creating what is not necessarily sarcastic, but sort of showing a level of doubt. Like, are you really going to do this thing that we're talking about here? If you put this together with everything we've talked about before, we have you and we have get caught. And then we have a level of doubt. When we get into actually translating this is going to make more sense, but just know that for right now, this character here seems to be doubting whether or not something can be caught by this girl right here.
Hi, Editing Senpai here. You can tell I'm a different one because I've got black headphones and not white ones. So I realize I kind of glossed over a very important grammar point that I meant to go over around this section, and then I didn't for some reason. So I'm going to try and rectify that real quick before we move on with the lesson. Within the sentence, we have the word omae, meaning you, and then the ni particle. But what I didn't really explain in very good detail is that in a passive form sentence, the ni is marking the direction that the verb is coming from. What this basically means in passive form is it's who the action is being done by, because the action is coming from whatever we have marked with ni. So in this case here, tabe rareru, our good old friends taberu, meaning to eat. In its passive form, tabe rareru would be to be eaten. And then if we have this in a sentence, omae ni tabe rareru. So this would be something along the lines of to be eaten by you. Now again, I want to emphasize the reason that a sentence like this works is because taberareru is a passive form sentence, and the ni means that this is coming from you. You can also think of something like this as being kind of accusatory, as in, we're being kind of negative here, right? We're basically accusing you of having done this action because the action is being caused by you, or it's coming from you. So if, for example, I were to make this a little bit longer and say something like, watashi no keiki. In case you haven't figured it out, keiki is just the word for cake in Japanese. So watashi no keiki ga, because again, the thing marked with ga is the one doing the being eaten, or doing the thing, doing the action of being eaten, essentially, right? Watashi no keiki ga omae ni taberareru. My cake. Actually, here, before we do this, let's go ahead and make this past tense, because, right, if we're accusing you of something, it's probably for something that you've already done. So, taberareru becomes taberareta. This is going to be yet another ending here, so we'll make it orange. So let's go ahead and break this down. Taberareta means got eaten, or more naturally, was eaten, right? So what is doing the getting eaten? It's my cake. My cake was eaten. Now, the omae ni is showing us where the action is coming from, aka by this person. My cake was eaten by you. I added the exclamation point here because don't eat my cake. Super rude, bro. Don't do that. This is also more naturally translated as you ate my cake. Because once again, you are the one that the action is coming from, and the thing I'm accusing you of is eating something that I own. Okay, hope that helped a little bit. Again, if this is a confusing concept for you for right now, don't worry, it'll become easier with time. Just think of something in a passive sentence marked with ni as by, and then whatever you have marked. So omae ni means that we're saying the action was done by this person. All right.
As for our next bubble, we've got some classics here, starting with the word baka. Now, I'm sure if you're into anime, you've probably heard this word once or twice, but we're adding it to our list formally now. The word baka means dumb. You can think of it as anything. If you want to call it stupid, if you want to call it idiotic, whatever you want to call it, that's totally fine. However, the important thing to note about the word baka is it belongs to the other category of words that we haven't really covered yet, that being descriptive nouns. But what is a descriptive noun, Senpai? Descriptive nouns are what textbooks and other teachers normally call na adjectives. However, I reject this concept that there are two types of adjectives. The only true adjectives in the Japanese language are the ones that end with the e character and have that form of conjugation. Na adjectives, as other places call them, are actually a form of noun that makes way more sense because descriptive nouns can take and use particles as well as the word da, which we haven't really covered yet, but just know that it's important. It's important that descriptive nouns can use the word da as well as a set of particles. The entire reason that descriptive nouns got called na adjectives in the first place is because descriptive nouns are nouns that are used specifically to describe a characteristic of something else, kind of like what adjectives do. But descriptive nouns have their very own particle known as na, which they use to attach to a word instead of using the I on the end of an e adjective. So, nigiyaka na mise, the word nigiyaka meaning like busy or lively or bustling, I suppose, and then mise being like a shop or a store. Nigiyaka na mise would be like a busy store or a thriving store or a bustling store. But once again, because the word nigiyaka cannot conjugate, you have to attach a particle to it in order to use it within a sentence. And if you're going to end your sentence by saying that something is bustling or is busy, you would have to do so using da. That is what a noun does. So they are, for all intents and purposes here, descriptive nouns. It's semantic in the end. You don't really have to memorize whether they're not adjectives or descriptive nouns. Just know that I'm right about this because Kier Dolly said it and Dolly Sama is right about everything, but also because I truly, genuinely believe that it's easier to understand this concept if you know about this first. Now, the reason that any of that matters is because when you're using a descriptive word to describe a noun, you do so with na for descriptive nouns or just with the e ending for an actual adjective. But when you need to describe an action, what you need to do is instead use the ni sound for descriptive nouns or something different for adjectives, right? And this is another huge difference between them and why I don't think they should be lumped into the same category. So the ni here is not the ni particle we saw before. This is now going to be what we call the descriptive ni. So the word that we are describing here is not a noun. It is in fact a verb. The verb suru, in fact. So here's something important that you have to note. We do actions, but we are descriptions. What that basically means is even though suru means to do, it can also be used with an adverb to instead say to be something. So if we were to say like kaji is a word that I've used before. Kaji o suru. Kaji, if you don't remember, which is totally okay because it's not part of our word list, kaji means like chores, like doing the dishes, doing the laundry. It's like household chores. Kaji o suru means to do chores. However, if instead of using kaji, we want to talk about an adverb or describe doing, we can use the word baka here. Baka ni suru would be to be dumb. So once again, If we have an actual thing that we can do here with the word to do, then we're talking about doing that thing. However, we can't do a descriptive noun. We can only be descriptive nouns. You can't really do busy or do pretty. You can be busy and you can be pretty. So we use the word ni suru here to describe something as being done in this particular way. Hopefully that is understandable. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below if you need me to explain it further, or, the option for getting a lesson is also on the table. So, baka ni suru, since we are being this type of way, we are being dumb. Okay, but you may have noticed we have yet another ending here that we need to talk about here, and we don't really see the word suru very well, do we? I wonder why that is. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, let's get our 3 all-stars back on the board here. We've got Nomu, our group 1, Taberu, our group 2, and Suru, our group 3, and let's go ahead and explain this brand new ending that we have, Nai. Luckily, this one's going to be a lot easier than when we explain the ta ending. The nai ending is going to work like this. In order for our group 1 verbs to use it, they need to shift into their a ending, just like with our passive form. So once again, no mu will become no ma. So if our word was sa su, it would become sa sa. If it were she knew, it would become she na, so on and so forth. Shift into the a ending form. Once you've done that, just attach nai. Step 1, shift into a. Step 2, add nai, and you're done. So if the word no mu means to drink, then no ma nai would mean don't drink, right? Because it's the don't negative form of the word. So it's not doing the drinking. Group 2, we know what to do here, right? The ru is dropped, then nai. If taberu means to eat, then tabe nai would mean don't eat. Basically, not eating something as opposed to eating something. Group 3, once again, since it is a group 3 word, the entire thing is going to get a makeover. We're going to go ahead and turn the entire word suru into she. And this is a very common thing that you're going to see with the word suru, is it tends to turn into the word she, or the sound she, if that makes it easier. So here, suru becomes she, and then we attach the word nai to make it negative. If suru means to do, then shi nai means don't do something. Okay, hopefully this concept here is fairly simple. Once again, it's a lot easier than the ta form, so if you got the ta form, you should get the nai form pretty easily. All right, here we are at the last thing that we need to talk about, really, and it's a fairly simple one. So this ending here, de, has a very, very special usage when used alongside the nai ending. So let's get all our stars back out here, okay? So we've got don't drink, don't eat, don't do. Now, if we attach de to the end of these, then they become what we call a command, right? But a kind of negative command, because the thing that you're telling somebody is not to do something as opposed to telling them to do something. So nai plus de is telling somebody not to do whatever it is they're attached to. Nomanaide would be don't drink, and then of course the context here would be whatever it is you're telling them not to drink, so don't drink it. Tabanaide would be don't eat it. Shinaide would be don't do it. So I have to stress once again that we do actions, but we are descriptions. So in the case of a word like shinaide, normally this means not to do something. But if a descriptive noun like this is telling us to be something, and shinai would be not be something, then shinai de would tell somebody not to be whatever the description is. So she is telling him, don't be dumb. Now, luckily for us, that's our last concept because we've already gone over the yo sentence ender here, so we should already know what that does. Let's go ahead and get straight into the translation. As always, take a moment to pause the video, use everything you've learned today to try and translate the panel yourself, and I'll see you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How'd it go? Hopefully it was pretty close to something I'm about to say here. Let's go ahead and start with translation number 1, the literal. This character here, being a little bit of a jerk, of course, saying, is it really going to get caught by you? So again, we have to say it in this kind of unnatural way because the actual word tsukamaerare is the word that we're building around, and that is to get caught. So the it in this case is going to be the monster, and we're wondering if it's going to get caught by you, showing about a level of doubt here, being a little bit sarcastic. I don't think he thinks that she's really capable of pulling this off, and that's why he is talking in the way he is. And then, of course, her response, baka ni shinai de yo, don't be dumb. That is the literal translation for what she is saying there. Okay, in my clean version here, not sure how this is going to go over with everybody necessarily, but basically, I've tried to capture the essence a little bit better, try and match the fact that it's a bunch of kids talking to each other, try and give them a little bit more personality here. First kid here says, do you really think you can catch it? Like, obviously, he's showing a level of doubt as to whether or not she can do this, so I think it's appropriate to have him say something like this to really call her out on her ability here. And then having her say something like, be quiet, dummy. Because again, even though it's not literally word for word what she's saying, the idea that she's getting across is she wants him to stop saying stupid things, right? She wants him to stop being dumb by saying stupid things. So she is telling him to be quiet, right? I think that's totally appropriate here. The dumb thing she wants him to stop is the dumb things that he's saying. So telling him to be quiet, I think, is totally appropriate here. Definitely works. Okay, and finally the English rewrite here. I've added a little bit more personality once again to the kid, and since I've got the freedom to make him say whatever I want to, I've gone ahead and changed it to, no way, you're going to try and catch that thing. Now, I think this one would need to be cleaned up a little bit by an editor because I think it's a little bit too long for the speech bubble here, though maybe not. I would have to look a little more into it, but I think adding that thing to really emphasize, how big and intimidating this Pokemon here is, really matches what's going on in the scene. And of course, the try and catch is, it's showing that he doesn't really think she can do it. And then her response here, of course I am, dummy. This completely takes away the whole don't be stupid or don't be dumb thing. I kept that a little bit in the word dummy, which I used for the other one too, because I think dummy I think it's cute. I think, these are like little 6-year-old kids. I think calling each other dummy totally works here. It's definitely like in the early 90s, we use the word dummy a lot. So having her say dummy still keeps the spirit of baka ni shinaide, but the of course I am is her, of course, shutting down his doubt. He's like, I don't know if you can do this. And she's like, of course I can. Of course I'm going to do this. So I think I still captured the spirit of what's going on here pretty well.